All right, so I think we can actually get started with the formal introduction. Alyssarhaye Graciano is a trilingual POC fiber artist. So you're in the tech industry as a linguistic specialist, but then you decided to quit your day's job and pursue a more creative career. And you mainly do knits, crocheting, macrame, and weaving as part of your everyday life. And you started BlackSheepMade as a way to fund an internship abroad while in college. But in 2014, you started doing public installations. You've done different workshops. I've been able to see a lot of that through my work with Movable Co. and San Jose Made. So that formal introduction to Alyssarhaye from BlackSheepMade. How are you doing today for those who are just joining?
Hi, I'm doing great. I have my coffee ready and some dog bones to distract my dog.
All right, awesome. So let's hurry up before the dog finishes them all. We're on a real time clock right now. So can you tell me a little bit how BlackSheepMade got started?
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me here. This is a really neat opportunity. But Black Sheep Made started, like you said, when I was in college. I got an opportunity to study abroad and I needed to fund that. I knew how to knit on like a loom, so not even like quote unquote real knitting, but I basically just made all of these beanies and scarves and sold them to friends, family, my parents' coworkers, just to fund my trip. And when I did that, I was able to make it to Costa Rica, where my internship was. And after that, I just found knitting to be really kind of soothing, especially during fast-paced college life. I wasn't much of a partier, still am not. So for me, it was just a way to kind of de-stress after the end of the day, or even in the middle of a lecture hall. And when I graduated in 2016, I just kind of kept it as a side hustle until end of 2016, spring 2017, when I started working a lot with San Jose Made and their local markets and stuff.
So now that it's become something more of a creative, like a part of your income and things, does it still have that like kind of calming and soothing aspect that it did when you were doing it for fun?
Yes and no. I would say it took a while for me to kind of separate the two. For example, I really love knitting because it's so, it's almost like meditating. It's very slow. If you're gonna knit a whole sweater, that's gonna take some time. And in order to distinguish, like, this is still soothing for me, I had personal projects, so a sweater for myself, and then I also had those custom orders that I was actually trying to sell, like at a market or on my website. And having that, the difference between the two types of projects really helped me stay in love with it. Although there were definitely some days where I was like, all of this, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore.
What were some of the initial roadblocks when you went from it being something for fun to something more professional?
I would say trying to determine my worth. I knew how I kind of valued my work ethic and my work style in an office setting, but transitioning that into art was very different. Like pricing essentially my artwork versus my time and how to fairly compensate myself was a big roadblock for me. Especially I started out selling my beanies for $10. So, and yarn, $6 a ball, you can maybe make 2 beanies out of that. So I really wasn't making a lot. And having to kind of build myself up and say like, no, this is how much your work is worth, and sticking to that, and not letting the folks who are at the market pass by and be like, $40 for a beanie, like, let me just go to Target. So it's really just kind of hyping myself up to say like, no, this is what my time and what my art is worth. And then another roadblock was just time. As an artist and often as a small business owner, it's just you. And so having to learn everything from how to build a website, how to do your marketing, what the heck taxes are. I mean, just as a human being, taxes are ridiculously complicated to understand. So when you're factoring in expenses and receipts, it's a lot. So having to navigate all parts of a business was a huge kind of hurdle to overcome. Still jumping over that said hurdle.
So you bring up like social media as far as like kind of like building yourself up. So when you were developing your pricing and you were like, I want to be worth about this amount, how did social media and marketing play a role for like when people walking by or people ordering stuff online? How did social media play a role in presenting yourself as being worth more? Like how do you use social media and marketing as a way to demonstrate your worth to other people and as well as yourself?
Yeah. Something I really enjoy when I follow an artist is seeing their behind the scenes process. I love seeing like how they make something, how they go about putting together a pot or, whatever they're making, a rug, a sweater. And so seeing that process for me was not only really just interesting. Sorry if you can hear that crow in the background having a grand old time outside.
Trying to chime into the conversation.
Yeah, he's super excited. But for me, when I was sharing my work, not only because I was interested in seeing other people's processes, but I felt that by showing my process, people were then able to understand like, oh, I can't just pick up a pair of needles and do that. Like one, like, yes, you can. You can teach yourself something, but you are correct in the fact that I've been doing this for, I think, almost 8 years at this point, and I want them to be able to see that within my process of how, whether that's from planning a workshop or like just seeing me post a video of like the toothpick size needles and knitting a sweater. So I feel that showing my process and kind of being organic and true to that really helps people realize like, oh, this is what I'm paying for. I'm not like Target's not going to show you how they make a sweater on a machine, but you can watch me knit the sweater and you realize, oh, that's going to take like 50 hours. Okay, I see why that's $300. Example, I don't actually sell a sweater for $300.
I mean, you should. I mean,
I should, yeah.
you can be like Da Vinci or anything else. Like that's how you get that designer stuff.
Yeah.
I really like that because I think a lot of creative artists don't typically like showing their process. I think a lot of creatives and are a little hesitant to really demonstrate their work because they feel like it's a form of bragging, but it's also about showing like, no, like this is very painstaking work.
And it's very real as well. And I know with social media, something that used to kind of scare me a little bit was like, oh, if I show my process, is somebody going to bite that? Because it's so easy to do that nowadays, to just be like, oh, I saw somebody's work, I really like that, I'm going to copy it. Or, oh, I saw how they made this kind of knot, now I can do it. And I think a little bit of that is we all just need to get over our ego of, yeah, okay, you know how to do this thing, but so do a bunch of other people, and they're going to want to, try out your methods. But it's how we use that method on our own and kind of mixing that with who we are that makes our art unique. And therefore it doesn't matter if somebody kind of uses part of your process or style, because it's still different.
Speaking of creating unique style, you were in Portland for a few months and you had done this like knitting pop-up. Can you tell us a little bit about it and what you learned as an art professional when you were down in Portland?
For sure. So I lived out in Portland for 2 years. Loved it, highly recommend it, whether you live there or just visit there. But very similar to San Jose's community, they're very supportive of the arts and of small business. And I was granted, after an application process, I was granted a leasing space in downtown Portland where I got to share my work. And I also had decided to share the work of others, whether that were from my friends in Portland, whether their artwork or even my family. And what I learned through that experience was, one, art and retail are two separate worlds. And you may be built for one, but you're not built for the other. I was running my pop-up 6 to 7 days a week, all by myself. And when you're also producing the work, that gets really tough. And so the model I chose to go with was, I call it like a Chipotle for knits, or a deli for knits. So I had a wall of yarn with all of these colors, and then I had like 3 different style beanies and 3 different style scarves, and essentially, oh, and also pet beds. But essentially you could walk in and you say, I like this scarf and I like it in that color. And then I would make it in 1 to 2 weeks. And for me, that really worked because every project was new because everybody's styles were so different. I got to implement your style with my work, and it just made every project really refreshing, really new. Um, and I learned a lot about like production time. Like, I know I can knit a beanie in a day, but when you have 6 beanies in your work order, that's not going to happen in a day. So I learned a lot about like, okay, I know I can make a beanie in an hour, and if I have 6, then I should be able to make that in 6 hours. But I need to go to the bathroom. I need to give my wrists a break. I need to eat. And so I really learned kind of the workflow of what it would be like to actually kind of be like a human knitting machine. But also if that was something I wanted to keep working towards, or somehow change my model to something that was actually sustainable. Because I know whether I like it or not, one day my wrists are not going to want to knit. So how can I carry my wrists for as long as I can?
This is this is a question that's kind of a non sequitur, but do you have your hands insured?
I
I've heard
don't.
some
I
artists
don't
do
cover California right now. I don't think they have a hands policy. I don't. I probably should. That's actually like the second or third time somebody's mentioned that.
because I imagine it's like tough on the hands. But you mentioned a little bit about time management and trying to figure out, okay, if I have this many orders and I have this much time, how do I get it done? So can you tell me some of like, do you have any apps or software or tools that you use for your regular day-to-day business?
Mm-hmm.
And can you explain a little bit about like how they are useful to you to make sure your business is sustainable?
Yeah. Side note, I just want to say these questions are really top tier. The last panel I was on asked me my favorite childhood cereal. So kudos to you for making me really think. um,
I'm going to ask that next, but never mind.
um, so in terms of apps and software, right now I'm kind of in this state of my business where I'm producing my own art, but I'm also outside of my business producing art for others. And by that I mean I'm kind of like a contract maker, a freelance maker. Folks will send me their sewing kits, their nail and string art kits. I put them together, give them honest feedback, and create content for them. And with those clients, I tend to use apps like Planoly, which just helps you plan out Instagram posts, Trello, which essentially you can set up like these columns of projects you have and move them from like an in progress list to a completed list to a needs to be redone, however you want to categorize them. Um, and then a lot of the Google suite, like Google Sheets, Google Docs. And those are great when I'm working with my clients because all these clients are in different cities, different states, and even if they weren't, we can't really be in the same room right now. And with everything being online, it's great that we can all access those things with our laptops or with our phones. But for my personal work, I'm actually very analog. I will continue to use like Google Suite apps or my Google Calendar, Zoom, but I actually have a very intricate planner that I use. I have way more highlighters and pens that I need, but it helps me kind of separate like, okay, what project, like the differences between projects. And I like being able to cross things out and circle things and add a post-it if I forgot something. I'm very much a tactile person. Um, and sometimes I will take my planner or notes I have in there and transfer them to one of these online apps to help me kind of streamline things. For example, I have a Google Sheet with like all of the purchases I've made, all of the payments I've been given. So that way I can see like, okay, it's all in one place. Whereas in my planner, it's on like 7 different pages and I might miss one. So I kind of blend the two. But for me, it really helps to like see it in front of my face and have that ability to just cross it out.
Awesome. So you said Planoly was one of them. What was it? Trulia was the other?
Trello, Trello.
Trello. I'm going to put them in the chat so people can take a look at themselves. I'm really glad that you mentioned that you do analog things. I think there's a lot of pressure for everyone to like, if you ever go like on LinkedIn or you're job hunting, like the big thing is making sure that, oh, do you know like this app and this app and this app and this thing? And like just the fact that you can run a successful business while still using like, you know, a planner, some pens, and a marker, and it looks like the like Ember is.
Yep. Sorry, I had to give a bone right quick.
Gotta give a dog a bone. So we're in a pandemic, which is why we're not in person discussing all of this. How did you transit? Because you were doing these pop-ups and doing all these public events as part of your business. How did you transition to doing stuff more online and more COVID-safe protocols? And what did you learn that you think can help other people who want to get started during the pandemic?
To be brutally honest and transparent, I didn't. I wouldn't say I like quit my business when the pandemic started, but I for sure put it on the back burner. At the beginning of last year, January 2020, I actually published my first book. It's a how-to knitting book. It gives you 30 patterns. It's great for beginners, intermediate, expert people. And it shows you a breakdown of like how to do techniques. If you go on my website, there's a link that you can put in the chat if you so wish. And the last few events that I did were like book signings to get this book out there. And once the pandemic hit, people kept telling me like, oh, this is great for you. You can market your book. People are going to be at home. Like, what else are they going to do but knit or learn something new? And I came into this conflict of pushing myself or my work onto people just felt so wrong. Like I was kind of in the mindset of, we all have limited resources right now, and I'm not going to ask somebody to give me what they might have or might not have to my book, or like, it just felt weird marketing my own work. And so instead of doing that, I kind of just stopped art altogether. I learned how to cook some new recipes. Right before the pandemic, I also got into distance cycling. So I got on my bike a lot, which is kind of bad, kind of good. I don't know. I wore a mask when I rode. But I really put art on the back burner because the self-marketing felt weird. And also there was just that lack of creative push. I would look at projects and not really want to do anything. And I think it did stem from like, oh, if I make something, I'm then going to have to market it. And that just feels weird. Like, we don't have these excess funds for art right now. So I'm not going to kind of market for that. And it was later in the year, I would say around summertime, when I did eventually transition to online workshops. And during the whole pandemic, before I did those workshops, I knew that was the direction that things were going. But I did let certain barriers stop me. Like, I don't know video editing. I don't have the right camera set up. At one point, I took my phone and then used some clamps to clamp it to a wooden dowel and then duct tape that dowel to a cardboard box. And I was just like, why am I filming like this? But it's, DIY. You got to do what you got to do. And eventually I kind of realized that your first online workshop, it's probably not going to be great, and that's okay. But you still need to do the workshop, even if you're duct taping your phone to the ceiling to get the shot, because from there you're going to learn like, okay, this is the kind of camera stand I need. Okay, this is the kind of software I should use. And I was lucky enough to be able to collaborate with a company in New York that sent me a camera and sent me a camera stand and sent me a ring light. And so I was able to test out these options to kind of build on that. And so my transition into kind of the pandemic artist was going online, really kind of just fine tuning those online workshops. And then I eventually reached out to San Jose Made, who I've done a lot of markets with. And I actually reached out to them and asked if they had a desk job for me. And I was like, hey guys, this art thing's not really working out. Like, can I shuffle some papers for you? Like, do you need me to do anything? It's great working with you. Can I do that? And they had a pop-up opportunity. And when I looked at that pop-up, I thought, okay, I can either use this pop-up to kind of see if I can rekindle my love for this art and this creativity, and rebuild my base back here in San Jose, because I had just moved back at the beginning of the year. Or I can do the pop-up And even if I realize I don't want to do this anymore, at least I got rid of a bunch of excess supplies that's just been sitting in my studio. So it took a while to want to do art again, to kind of get those creative juices back. But I feel like that initial break I took of just being outside and trying other things and other crafts outside of knitting, crochet, any fiber things really helped to kind of give me that jump start.
I really appreciate the transparency and like the honesty about just starting the pandemic and going like taking that break, because this whole workshop is about, and also this is my first workshop, so it made me a little nervous when you said it's gonna not be great, so it's okay. But when you said we're all art professionals, but we're all like one or two or three people working on this, and I think if you are someone who is an entrepreneur and you're building a business, your like mental health and your headspace is like really important, and you can't really force yourself to be successful. And I guess this is like a very leading question, but do you feel like because you took that break, because you did those things, did you feel like it benefited you as you are right now, like later on, as far as like kind of, did you feel like that was necessary to get to where you're at right now, like taking that break to bike and to kind of reconfigure yourself?
Yeah, I think it for sure did. I feel like, and again, this is different for everyone because I'm sure there are artists out there who continued to push themselves through the pandemic and are better for it. But for me, I feel like that break gave me, like I allowed myself that space to be like, okay, I just need to take the step back for myself and avoid burnout. Because I will say when I eventually did jump back into arts and I had that pop up in downtown San Jose, there was a point where I was like, holy crap, if I were doing this the whole year, I would not last right now. And I needed that break to get me through my pop up in downtown. And I would say I am the better for it. Sometimes I would get on myself and say like, oh, like I could have knit a whole sweater, or I could have learned how to do this, learned how to do that. But I feel like the break was just the best decision for me because I wasn't putting pressure on myself to create. I just accepted that if I create, I create. If I don't, that's totally okay.
That's awesome. And you're right. There are some people who like powered through the pandemic, and this is like kind of their period of growth, but I'm glad you said that. So, so how much do you think someone, for you, and I guess this is like a general question, how much do you think someone should like budget to start a creative project, like meant to earn money? Like for you, like you don't have to give us all your financials, but you know, maybe a percentage wise, or like how do you think someone should financially get started? Like how do you build a nest egg when you're going from, you know, quitting your day job to building something that you're hoping that will be part of like your a stable part of your income?
I know this isn't an option for everyone, but if you can live with family, do that. I currently live with my grandparents, and that helps a lot. But when you're trying to build a project, whether that's a whole business or like a workshop idea, hold on to your day job for as long as you can. But when I'm budgeting for a workshop, I tend to, I don't want to say work backwards, but I don't start out with the budget number. So like, for example, I more so go with like, okay, what is it that I want to do a knitting workshop? What are the things that I need to do that knitting workshop? Whether it's an event space, the supplies, am I going to have to market? Am I going to need an assistant? So I go through all those things and I figure out, okay, how much are each of those things going to cost me? And then I kind of get that round number of like, okay, it's going to cost me X number of dollars to get all the things I need for this workshop. And then from there, I figure out, okay, can any of those things be lowered? Like, do I need the $50 yarn? No. Can I get a blend yarn, or can I go for a more, whether sustainable or just economically friendly option? And then I somehow factor in my time. And then I have that final number of, okay, this is what it's going to take to produce what I want to do. Because what's important is not so much the money, but what is it that you want to put out in the world? What are you trying to share? And so then once I have that number, then from there I go, okay, this is this is how much money I need to fulfill this idea, to fulfill this project. How can I get those funds? And that's when the day job helps. The living with parents or grandparents helps. Budget, or maybe not buying that coffee every day. That was like one of the harder lessons for me. Like, okay, you don't need boba every day.
Okay, thanks for letting know boba. I'll write that down. That's a big one. That's a very San Jose esque advice.
It is, and it's very like I feel like during the pandemic, at least for me, I've been leaning into like, the world's kind of burning down right now. I need a pick me up. I'm just gonna go get some boba. But if I didn't have a pick me up every day, and I just like read my book or something, like, oh, I could have like this whole project going.
So it's a balancing act for sure.
It is.
So how does someone build their social media and online presence? Or how did you, I should say?
Yeah. I would say my presence was built and also greatly accepted because of the fact I was very organic. Just, I guess you could say I was very #no filter. Back in 2017, San Jose Made had a series of weekly markets in the summertime. It was at the Gordon Biersch location, and it was every Thursday night. They had a series of makers and food trucks, and those were some of my very first markets as BlackSheepMade. And I basically, once they put out the applications, I signed up for pretty much every week that summer. And every week, even though I knew I was going to do a market every week, I always forgot something. Whether it was cash change, my sign that said who the heck I was, one of the products I was selling, the table. I once forgot the table. There are all these things. And on my social media, I would kind of like air out my dirty laundry. Like I would go on stories and be like, all right, guys, this week we're playing the same game. What did Alyssarhaye forget this time? And just kind of being very open and honest of like, you're going to mess up. I mess up. You're going to mess up. We're all going to mess up. But you still have to just do the show. And so I feel like being my honest self and showing not just my successes, but when I tripped, really helped people realize that it was, or it is, a person behind my business, behind my art. And it wasn't just some face that they don't know that's like posting all of these things. Because I feel like a lot of times we're scrolling through social media and we follow these brands, and it's a person, but that person isn't the business. And I feel like that just being raw and organic and showing who you actually are really helped build my social circle, social media circle. And also when I would share a story, when I would share those stories of messing up, that's when I would get the most response, the most replies. Whereas if I just posted about, I don't know, some plant hanger that I was launching, it never received the same feedback. And so I quickly realized like, oh, just show you. And I do have a separate social media. I have my business social media, and then I have my personal Instagram. And I would say more often than not, I am totally blurring the lines between the two. Like it's honestly at this point, it's kind of pointless that I have two, because I'm always putting my knitting on the other one or vice versa. So yeah, just being your true self, allowing people to get to know you. Of course, keep that barrier of personal things. Like you don't want the internet to know everything. My dad, who I think is on this Zoom, has gone to a cafe once or twice, and the person has said, oh, I know you, you're BlackSheepMade's dad. And one of those instances for me, I was like, oh, I kind of share too much. Like maybe I'll step back. So just having a barrier, like show who you are and be true to yourself, but you don't got to show everything.
Shout out to Francisco, who was one of the first people to be on the Zoom call.
Yeah.
All right, I think this will be one of the last questions. And how do you, what was the moment when you were doing BlackSheepMade or whatever you're doing, like whatever project you're doing, where you're like, I'm an art professional? Do you feel like there's an aha moment when it comes to that, or did it just was it kind of like a realization way down the line?
Um, I'll let you know when I figure that out. I'm still trying to determine that, I would say. There are plenty of times when I felt like I didn't go to art school. Like, what am I doing teaching other people how to do knitting or crochet or what have you? And I think I've thought about more of what doesn't make me an artist than what does. I would say I felt the most professional when I Googled my name and my brand name and saw that I was on the Target website. That was for my book. And even the book has been out for just over a year now. And there are some times where I'm like, oh yeah, I wrote a book. Like, okay, I'm the real deal. But then there are other days where I'm like, am I? Like, you just go back and forth. I really don't think that there's like a definitive moment. Perhaps for some there is, but for someone of like me, I would say you kind of go back and forth of thinking like, I'm legitimate. No, I'm not. Yes, I am. Today, I am.
I love that. Thank you so much, Alyssarhaye. This was a really great conversation. I wish we could definitely talk longer, but we have other panelists to talk to. But before we get to that, and wave, and hi, Amber. Thank you for being so nice and so kind. Did she start nibbling on your ankle at a certain point?
I was actually constantly feeding her treats under the desk. So no dinner for her today.
A true professional. So before we go to Jai, we're going to have a breakout room session. This is an opportunity for a lot of you to talk amongst yourselves, maybe discuss what you thought about the workshop.